The Pink Tape by Lil Uzi Vert just dropped, and I'm gonna be reviewing the album. And first thing I gotta say is, oh my god, the versatility is crazy. Imagine someone got into like a coma 5 years ago, and before that they were listening to Lil Uzi Vert, and then they just woke up, and now they want to put on some Uzi, and they put on Werewolf or The End. They're not even gonna realize it's Uzi because, oh my god, when did this man decide to make metal music and rock music? When did that happen? I guess now. But yeah, versatility was crazy. Uzi made like I said, metal rock music, but he also made that like Cardi style rage music. And then he also went back to kind of a return to form in some of his songs, like with 2016 Uzi. Crazy. So some examples of this versatility was on CS, which had Uzi absolutely floating on a rock punk style beat. There's also a really nice melodic break in between certain sections of the song. Then there was Werewolf, which had a feature from Bring Me the Horizon. This was a great feature, probably one of the best features on the whole album. Uzi wasn't in it that much though, so it did kind of feel out of place. It didn't really feel like an Uzi song, not just because it was like literal heavy metal, but also just because he wasn't in it that much. Even the closing song called The End had some rock elements in it, which, by the way, that was a great closing to the album. It literally sounded like a closing, like when you watch a movie, you'd think that would play in the credits scene. And then, as I referenced earlier, there were a lot of rage songs like Times 2, which actually was a Ken Carson produced beat, as well as Suicide Doors, which sounded exactly like a Cardi song, just with Uzi's voice, with all the different inflections he used and ad-libs that were so prevalent in the song, as well as like repeat phrases that he had, such as
I feel like bitch, I'm a crow. I feel like bitch, I'm a crow. I feel like bitch, I'm a crow.
But with all of that change and variation, there was still traditional Uzi, and I mean like really traditional, like 2016 Uzi, with songs like Rehab, which had this like spacey beat and like production vibe. Now, besides versatility, Uzi also took a bunch of inspiration in this album, which I could see as maybe being a flaw to some people because they expected fully just new Uzi songs, and there were quite a few songs that were like remixes of old songs, but ultimately I think Uzi added his own flavor enough and made it new and interesting enough that it really wasn't a problem for me personally. For example, on songs like Mama I'm Sorry, Uzi alluded to Chief Keef with Hate Being Sober. He also alluded to the song Somebody That I Used to Know, which added a nice melodic feel to the song. CS, which I already talked about, was a remix of the song Chop Suey. And then Nakamura, not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, that song had a prevalent sample of a famous WWE wrestler's theme song, which made for a really interesting beat. On the song Endless Fashion with Nicki Minaj, the beat was a remix of the I'm blue, dabu dee babu da, whatever, that song. That's also where we got the bar, I got a Republican doctor, made my ass great again, MAGA, from Nicki Minaj, which did make me cringe, like out of this world, but it was so cringe that it was kind of funny too, so I'm kind of here for it. Speaking of features, there weren't a lot of them, but when they were there, they were good. For example, Travis Scott and Don Toliver had really good features on A for Travis Scott and Patience for Don Toliver. They had really nice background vocals on these tracks that really set a cool mood for each song. Ad-libs were also very, very prominent in this album, and for the most part, I think they added to the listening experience and made the songs better. The only gripe I had was with this one new ad-lib Lil Uzi Vert tried, which was like this growl snort thing. It was really weird. It wasn't for me. There were also 3 bonus songs on this album, which weren't anything too crazy to me. They weren't bad, but they weren't like fantastic. They were just kind of whatever. And overall, including the 3 bonus songs, this album came out to 26 songs, which is huge. And usually I'm not a fan of albums that big, but it wasn't really a problem for me with this album. However, although overall I think this album was great, I do have one pretty major gripe, and that was that this album didn't really feel like an album. The songs didn't really go together that much. I feel like there wasn't that much direction in this album, and overall that made for the album experience not being as best as it could have been. Also, for the first half of the album, there was a lot of repetition in terms of like subject matter. All Uzi was really talking about was like how he could get girls, being really confident, dealing with haters. Like that was really all he was talking about in the first half or quarter of this album. But that really wasn't so much of a problem in the whole context of the album because he kind of dropped that later on. In fact, he really balanced it out by taking a complete 180 towards the back half of the album, where he got more into this emotional dark state. With songs like Rehab and Patience, Uzi gives us insight into his more problematic thoughts. And then there's Days Come and Go, which explores Uzi's insecurities and thoughts. Also, this song has a great hook, which I think is a strength of Uzi in general on this album as a whole. So with all that being said, individually, these songs are great. I'm going to go back to them. I really enjoyed them. And overall, this album did show what Uzi could do with versatility and all of that. It was a good display of his attributes. But the songs don't really go with each other. It doesn't feel like an album whatsoever, really. And with something like the Pink Tape, I really thought it was going to be more thematic, and it wasn't. Which maybe is a little bit my fault too, because I had certain expectations, but it just didn't really feel like an album to me. So that is going to drop it a little bit, and ultimately I am going to give The Pink Tape by Lil Uzi Vert a solid 8 out of 10.